What if your freedom depended on one impossible night in the Alpha King's chambers? No bond, no mercy, just a bargain drenched in danger, desire, and a fate even the king cannot control. Tonight, Cirrus Vale must survive the most feared alpha in the kingdom. Hey Wild Hearts, welcome back. If you love dark romance, danger, and destiny, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next episode. Now, let's begin. The Great Hall. The Great Hall fell silent as the Alpha King rose from his throne. Kale Draven, a storm in human form. His golden eyes swept across nobles and warriors who bowed instantly. All but one. Cirrus Vale stood in chains at the center of the hall, and Omega offered up like a scrap. Whispers hissed through the crowd. Worthless. Barren. She won't last a night. But she kept her chin high, silver eyes locked forward. If she was going to die, she'd meet death standing. Kale descended the steps, slow, deliberate, every movement claiming the room. When he stopped before her, he lifted her chin with a single finger. Kale, low, dangerous. Do you want freedom, Cirrus Vale? The hall froze. Her voice trembled, but her spirit didn't. Cirrus, yes. Kale leaned in, not tender, not gentle, but assessing, like a wolf deciding whether to devour or keep. Kale, then survive one night in my chambers, and I will set you free. Gasps erupted, a bargain, not a claim, a test, not a bond. Cirrus swallowed hard. Cirrus, and if I fail? His answer was ice. Kale, then you won't need freedom. The chains were released. The choice was sealed. The walk to the chambers. He took her by the wrist, not cruel, but unyielding as they left the hall. Stone corridors stretched like veins through the castle. Torches flickered. Every step echoed with the same truth. She had entered the wolf's den. There would be no running, not tonight. Inside, the chamber door slammed shut. Kale circled her, not like a lover, but like a predator measuring a challenge. Yet, unlike the rumors, he didn't pounce, he didn't touch, he watched. Intense, controlled, too controlled. Kale, you look at me with fear and fire, an interesting mix. Cirrus, I'm here to survive, nothing more. He stepped closer, close enough that his shadow swallowed hers. Kale, we'll see. Their stares clashed, his dominance, her defiance, sparking a tension that curled in the silence. But just as Kale reached for her, Kale, a violent boom rocked the castle walls. The torches flickered, shouts echoed from the courtyard. Kale's head snapped toward the door, eyes blazing with sudden fury. Kale, snarling, they dare breach my gates tonight. He turned to Cirrus, jaw clenched, torn between war and the bargain. Kale, do not move. He threw the doors open. Armed guards rushed down the corridor. Guard, panicked. My king! The rebels have broken through the outer wall. Kale's expression changed. Not fear, not worry. Rage. He looked back at Cirrus one last time, eyes burning with a promise she didn't understand. Kale, darkly, survive the night and survive them. He vanished into the corridor. As the door slammed, leaving Cirrus alone in the Alpha King's chamber, with danger closing in on all sides.
The chamber felt too large in Kale's absence, the silence too sharp. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the room, her pulse stumbling as distant shouts rattled the stone walls. Steel clashed, men roared, flames crackled somewhere in the courtyard below. She backed away from the door, her breath unsteady. "One night," he'd said. "One night to survive him." No one mentioned an army at the gates. Another boom, closer this time, sent dust drifting from the ceiling. Sarah flinched, wrapping her arms around herself. She had no weapon, no allies, no escape. Just the scent of him still lingering in the room, cedar, smoke, and something darker that clung to her lungs. Her eyes slid to the balcony doors. For a heartbeat, she considered it. Jump, run, vanish. But freedom wouldn't come from falling to her death on stone. Before she could take a step, the chamber doors burst open. Kyle strode inside, cloak torn, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with a fury that seemed barely leashed. Blood streaked one arm, not his, she realized, but someone else's. He kicked the doors shut behind him, and the room trembled with the force. Sarah stumbled back as he approached, every step of his calculated, predatory, but not careless, not wild, controlled. Always controlled. "Still here," he muttered, voice low and rough. "Good." She swallowed. "What's happening?" Kyle stopped in front of her, his chest rising and falling with slow, tempered breaths, like a man forcing himself not to snap. An attack, poorly planned but inconveniently timed. His eyes swept over her, checking, assessing, claiming. "They won't reach this wing, not while I still breathe." She lifted her chin, defiant even in fear. "You expect me to feel safe because you say so?" Kyle stepped closer. Too close. His hand came up. Not gripping her, just brushing a strand of hair away from her face, fingers lingering near her cheek. Her breath hitched despite herself. "I don't expect you to feel anything. Fear me, hate me, curse me if you want, but you'll live. I gave my word." Conflicted, that was the only word for his gaze. A storm held back by sheer force of will. Desire restrained by duty. A man who could break her in half, choosing instead to cage himself. Outside, another explosion shook the glass panes. Sarah flinched again. Without thinking, Kyle caught her wrist, not harsh, but firm, grounding her against the chaos. His voice dropped, darker. "They're not here for me, Sarah." Her blood turned to ice. "Then who?" Kyle's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time she saw something beneath the arrogance and power, something like fear, buried deep. Before he could answer, bam, bam, bam. Fists pounded on the chamber doors. "My king!" a guard shouted from the corridor. "They've breached the inner hall. We must move you now." Kyle didn't look away from Sarah, not even for a second. His fingers slid from her wrist, but the heat of his touch stayed on her skin. "Do not leave my sight," he said quietly. "From this moment on." He turned, drawing his blade in one smooth motion as the doors shuddered under the force of another blow. Shadows danced across his face, jaw tight, shoulders coiled for war. Sarris's pulse hammered, not because of the rebels, because of him. Because she suddenly understood surviving the night no longer meant surviving the Alpha King's chamber. It meant surviving everything coming for them both.
Steel split through the air as the chamber doors buckled. Kale surged forward with lethal precision, meeting the breach head-on. Sarris staggered back, breath tight, watching as shadows and steel flooded the threshold. The first rebel barely made it through before Kale's blade slashed across his chest, dropping him in a single blow. Another lunged. Kale pivoted, fast, fluid, merciless. Every movement was control, violence shaped into something almost elegant. Sarris had never seen power like his up close. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. And it reminded her with startling clarity that this was a man who could kill her just as easily as protect her. A third rebel charged, but Kale grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the stone wall with such force the impact echoed through the chamber. The rebel crumpled, unconscious. Silence followed. Heavy, electric. Kale stood there, chest rising, blade dripping, eyes glowing like molten gold. When he finally turned toward Sarris, she forgot how to breathe. Her voice came out softer than she intended. You fight like you don't fear anything." Kale wiped the blade with a cloth, gaze never leaving her. "I fear only what I can't control." He stepped toward her, slow, intentional. She backed up instinctively until her spine met the cold stone wall. He stopped in front of her, too close, crowding her space, yet not touching her. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "And right now, Sarris, that is you." Her pulse stumbled. "I didn't ask to be brought here." "No," he murmured, eyes burning into hers. "But someone wanted you found. Someone wanted you delivered. Tonight proves that." Her brows knit. "You think those rebels were here for me?" "I don't think. I know." She shook her head. "Why? I'm no one." Kale leaned in, one hand braced against the wall beside her head, his breath grazing her cheek. His tone softened. Not gentle, but honest. Quiet honesty was rarer than tenderness with a man like him. "You want the truth? I'll give it to you. But not while there's blood at my door and traitors in my halls." His fingers brushed her chin, not to claim, not to command, but to make her look at him. "You stay beside me, until I deal with this, until I decide who sent them. Then we finish our bargain." His eyes flicked to her lips for the briefest second. It was enough to steal her breath, enough to tell her the danger between them wasn't just outside these walls. A horn sounded in the distance, sharp and urgent. Kale stepped back, tension snapping into command once more. "Move with me. Do exactly as I say." He opened the hidden passage behind the chamber's hearth. "And Sarris." She paused, meeting his eyes. "Don't run. Not tonight." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was obedience or something far more dangerous. Together, they slipped into the passage as smoke and chaos swallowed the castle behind them. The hidden passage swallowed them in darkness, lit only by a single torch Kale tore from the wall. The narrow corridor wound downward, stone walls closing around them like a throat. Footsteps and chaos thundered overhead, muffled by thick layers of rock.
Sarah's followed close behind, her breath shallow. Every few strides, Cale glanced back, not out of distrust, but to make sure she was still there. His silhouette moved like a shadow born for war, broad shoulders framed in flickering gold. She hated how safe she felt behind him. She hated that she needed him at all. At the base of the passage, Cale stopped at an iron gate and pressed his palm against a seal etched into the metal. Faint light pulsed beneath his skin. The lock released with a low groan. Sarah stared. That wasn't normal. Cale didn't answer immediately. He pushed the gate open, motioning her through, his voice steady but not cold. There are many things about this kingdom you don't yet understand, and I won't have you learning them from the mouths of traitors. She stepped into what looked like an old war chamber, maps, weapons, sigils, and a long table scattered with sealed documents. It felt hidden, forbidden, important. Cale shut the gate behind them. The moment the sound echoed, the room stilled. Quiet pressed in. For a moment, it was just the two of them. Sarah's turned to him, arms crossed, not defiant, but bracing herself. Then tell me, she said quietly, why are they after me? Cale removed his cloak, tossing it on a chair, eyes never leaving her. Because you exist. Her brow tightened. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give until I confirm what they know. But understand this, Saris. Your life has value, far more than you realize, and far more than I intended to entangle myself with. Entangled? Cale stepped closer. She didn't retreat this time. He studied her face as though memorizing something he wished he could forget. When I chose you in that hall, I expected a night, a challenge, a test of will. I didn't expect rebels. I didn't expect betrayal. And I didn't expect... His voice trailed, his jaw tightening. Expect what? She whispered. He exhaled through his nose, frustrated with himself. That you would matter in any way beyond the bargain. The words struck her, the honesty of them, the tension coiled beneath them. She didn't know what to say. Before she could speak, a horn sounded again in the distance, closer this time, urgent and sharp. Cale's eyes snapped toward the sound. Duty reclaimed him like armor sliding back into place. We move again soon, he said, pulling a fresh weapon from the wall. They're regrouping. If they breach this level... A sudden rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Cale grabbed Saris by the waist, pulling her against him to steady her as the chamber trembled. Her hands landed on his chest, heartbeats slamming against her palms. For one suspended breath, neither moved. His voice dropped, rough at the edges. Stay with me, no matter what you hear, no matter what happens. Saris lifted her gaze. I'm not afraid of them. His eyes darkened. Good, because they are not the ones you should fear. Before she could ask what he meant, another explosion shattered the moment, this one directly above them. The ceiling cracked. Cale pushed her behind him, blade drawn. The rebels had found the lower passage, and there would be no more running. Stone rained from the ceiling as cracks split across the chamber. Saris stumbled back, shielding her head, while Cattell braced himself beneath the shaking beams. The rebels were no longer distant shadows. They were above them, closing in, tearing through every layer of the castle to reach this place. Cattell's voice cut through the chaos, firm and unshaken. Stay behind me. He moved with lethal purpose, dragging the war table aside to reveal a narrow stair hidden in the floor. Before he could open it fully, a section of the ceiling gave way. Dust and light burst into the room, and figures with blades dropped through the smoke. Saris gasped. Cattell was already in motion.
The first rebel lunged, and Cattell met him with a violent strike. Steel flashed, a body fell. Another charged, and Cattell pivoted, grabbing the attacker by the collar and slamming him to the ground with bone-crushing force. But this time, there were too many. Cattell took down two more, but a third slipped past him, eyes locking onto Ceres like a predator that had finally found its prey. Her blood went cold. He raised his blade toward her throat. Shing! Cattell was there in less than a heartbeat, his sword intercepting the rebel's strike. Metal screamed against metal. Cattell shoved the attacker back and drove his blade through the rebel's chest with brutal finality. The room fell silent again. Sarah stared at him, not in fear, but in realization. He hadn't just fought for his kingdom. He fought for her. Cattell grabbed her wrist, not rough, but urgent. His breathing was heavy, controlled only by will. "They are not here to kill you," he said, voice low. "They want to take you." The way he said it, the darkness in his eyes, sent a chill through her spine. "Why?" she asked. Cattell shook his head once. "Because of what you are." His gaze locked onto hers, intense, unguarded for a rare second. And she saw something there she didn't expect. Fear. Not for himself. For her. He opened the hidden stair and motioned her downward. "Go," he ordered, "before they regroup." Ceres hesitated. "Cattell, tell me the truth. What am I?" His jaw clenched. For a moment, the Alpha King, feared by all, untouchable, unstoppable, looked as though he was fighting himself more than any blade. Then he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You are the reason my enemies will burn this kingdom to ash." Ceres froze. Before she could process the words, before she could question, the sound of more boots thundered overhead. Cattell stepped in front of her again, blade raised, shoulders squared to face the storm. "Move, Ceres." His voice was a command, but his eyes betrayed something else. Not dominance, not anger, desperation. She descended the first step, heart racing, torn between terror and a pull toward the man protecting her. Above, rebels roared as they broke through the last barrier. Cattell didn't look back as he lifted his sword. "I will find you. Do not stop. Do not look back." The stair door slammed shut between them, plunging Ceres into darkness, just as the rebels flooded the chamber above. Steel met steel, and Cattell Draven faced them alone.
The stairwell swallowed Ceres in darkness. Cold air wrapped around her ankles as she descended, each step echoing like a heartbeat inside the stone throat of the castle. Above her, steel clashed and men screamed. Kale was still fighting. She paused, breath unsteady, fingers gripping the wall. She should keep moving. He told her to keep moving. But the darkness pressed in, and with it came a truth she could no longer ignore. She didn't want to leave him behind. Not the man who could have abandoned her. Not the man who chose to stand between her and death again and again. A distant roar shook dust from the ceiling. Ceres flinched. Her legs suddenly refused to move. Anger, fear, and something dangerously close to longing surged in her chest. "I'm not running anymore." She turned back up the steps. But before she could climb even 2 stairs, a voice drifted from the darkness below. A woman's voice, smooth, cold, amused. "Going somewhere, little Omega?" Ceres froze. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked, features hidden beneath a hood, but the scent that rolled off her was unmistakable. Omega. But not like Ceres. This presence was older, wilder, and wrong. The woman stopped a few steps from her, tilting her head as though examining a curiosity in a glass case. You truly don't know, do you? What you are, what you carry, why even kings would kill or kneel for you. Sarah stepped back, pulse racing. Who are you? The woman smiled, a slow, cruel curve of lips. Someone who once sat where you stand. Someone who learned what happens to omegas with power and survived. Her voice sharpened. But you won't survive long, child, not with him. Ceres's stomach knotted. Kale has protected me. The woman laughed softly. Kale Draven protects only what he intends to own. When he discovers the truth about your blood, he will cage you tighter than any rebel ever could. Sarah swallowed, forcing her voice to steady. Then why are you here? If you want me dead, kill me. If you want to take me, try. The woman's eyes gleamed under the hood. Oh, I don't want to kill you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. I want to free you, before he marks you. Those words struck deeper than blades. Ceres's breath hitched. Marks, ownership, fate. Before she could respond, the woman moved faster than thought, her hand closing around Ceres's wrist. Heat shot beneath her skin, burning like liquid fire. She gasped, collapsing to one knee. Images flooded her mind, a throne of flames, a kingdom in ruin, Kale covered in blood, a bond spiraling out of control. Then, crash! The stair door above exploded off its hinges. The hooded woman jerked her hand away and snapped her head up. Kale stood at the top of the stairs, eyes burning like an unleashed storm, chest streaked with soot and blood, alive, furious, and radiating enough force to quake stone. His voice was a snarl wrapped in ice. Step away from her. The woman clicked her tongue. Too late, Alpha. The awakening has already begun. She vanished in a burst of scent and shadow, leaving Ceres on the steps, trembling, breath shattered, memories not her own flickering behind her eyes. Kale rushed down to her, dropping to one knee. Ceres, look at me. She lifted her gaze. He cupped her face, steady, grounding, but his eyes were shaking with something she had never seen in him before. Fear. What did she do to you? He asked, voice low, controlled, and breaking beneath the surface. Sarah swallowed, barely able to speak. She said, I'm the reason kingdoms burn. Kale's expression darkened, not in anger, but in confirmation. The truth she feared wasn't a lie. Kale's jaw tightened as he held Ceres's face in his hands. Her pulse fluttered beneath his thumbs, uneven and frightened. The torchlight trembled across her features, revealing the confusion and pain swirling in her eyes. He hated it. Not the fear itself, but that someone else had put it there. Ceres, he said quietly, voice low and edged with control. Tell me exactly what she did. Ceres swallowed, forcing air into her lungs. Flames, screams, a throne in ruins. The images still flickered at the edge of her mind. She showed me something. I don't know if it was real, but it felt real. Her voice shook despite her effort to stay steady. She said I would destroy kingdoms. She said you would cage me.
Cale closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in denial, in restraint. When he looked at her again, the gold in his irises had darkened, molten, and dangerous. "Listen to me," he said, each word firm, measured. "Whatever she showed you, whatever she whispered, her purpose was fear. Fear makes Omegas run. Fear makes them easy to claim. And she wants you claimed by anyone but me." Saris's breath caught. "So you do intend to claim me?" Cale didn't retreat. He didn't lie. His thumb brushed slowly along her jaw, a touch that felt too gentle for a man who bled without flinching. "I intend to keep you alive." That wasn't the answer she asked for, but it was the truth in his voice that made her chest tighten. Cale stood and offered her his hand. She hesitated, only for a heartbeat, then placed her palm in his. His grip closed around hers, warm and commanding. "You're trembling," he murmured as he guided her to her feet. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "No," he said, "but you're changing." Those words sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could ask what he meant, the castle groaned above them, a reminder that the night was not done and neither were their enemies. Cale stepped closer, voice dropping to that low register that always seemed to find the weak places in her defenses. "From this moment on, you stay where I can touch you, where I can reach you." Saris tensed. "So I can be controlled." His lips brushed near her ear, not touching, but close enough to claim space, breath warm against her skin. "So I can protect what I don't want to lose." Those words rooted her to the stone floor. She looked up at him, at a man feared by armies, a man who had killed and conquered without hesitation. And yet here, with her, his voice held something he probably wished he could rip out of himself. They stood like that, too close, too unguarded, until distant horns sounded again, signaling movement in the rebel ranks. Cale stepped away, the moment snapping like a pulled thread. "We move," he said, drawing a dagger and pressing it into her hand. "If anyone touches you, hesitate and you die. Strike and you live." Saris stared at the blade, at the weight of it, at the future it implied. "Cale," she said softly. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, without meeting her eyes, he spoke the first piece of the truth. "Not an Omega." Saris's heartbeat stumbled. Cale opened the next iron door, the torchlight cutting into another dark corridor. "Not just an Omega," he corrected quietly. "You are something extinct, something hunted, something that was never meant to survive." Sarah stared at him, breath caught in her chest. But before she could demand the rest, voices echoed down the tunnel, rebels closing in. Cale grabbed her hand again and pulled her forward. "Run," he commanded, "and I'll tell you the rest if the night lets us live."
Their footsteps pounded through the narrow stone tunnel, shadows leaping across the walls as the torchlight trembled in Cale's grip. Behind them, rebel voices grew sharper, closer, the hunt tightening like a noose. Saris ran, but her mind spun faster than her feet. Not an Omega. Extinct. Hunted. That single fragment of truth echoed louder than the war above their heads. The tunnel curved and widened, opening into an abandoned lower hall. Broken pillars and old banners marked it as a forgotten part of the castle, a place of dust and ghosts. Cale stopped abruptly and pulled her into an alcove, pressing her back against the cold stone. His body shielded hers, one arm braced beside her head, his chest rising hard and fast. Not from fear. From fury he was holding back by inches. He leaned in close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek. "Listen to me," he whispered, voice low, controlled, dangerous. "Whatever happens next, do not let them take you. I will kill every man in these tunnels before I let that happen. Do you understand?" Saris met his eyes. Golden, molten,
conflicted. "Why? Why do you matter to me?" Kale's jaw flexed. He looked away, only for a heartbeat before his gaze snapped back to hers with naked intensity. "Because your existence can break kingdoms, and because I don't want to watch you burn." Her breath caught. His face was inches from hers, shadows carving sharp lines across his features. The torchlight made him look carved from fire and ruin. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "What am I?" Kale lifted his hand, not to restrain, but to touch. His fingers brushed her cheek, slow, reverent, as though she were something holy and forbidden at once. "You are lumen blood," he said, "the last of a bloodline that was supposed to die a century ago." Saris's pulse stumbled. "I don't know what that means." "It means," Kale murmured, "you are not built to serve or kneel. You were born to bind." The word hung between them. Bind. Her voice barely left her throat. "Bind what?" Kale's hand slid down to her jaw, holding her there, not with force, but with truth. "Bind. Alphas." Saris's breath shattered. One touch, one choice, one bond from a lumen blood can command an alpha's will, mind, instinct, even his violence. Kale's voice deepened. "That is why you are hunted, why they want you alive." Saris stared up at him, stunned. "And you?" Kale's eyes burned. "I want you free." Before she could respond, footsteps thundered into the hall, rebels flooding through the corridor they'd just left. Kale stepped forward instantly, shielding her with his body, blade drawn. "Stay behind me," he growled. But this time, Saris grabbed his arm. Her voice was soft, but unshaking. "I'm not a burden to drag behind you." Kale froze for a moment, not because of danger, but because of her. Slowly, he turned his head, their faces close again, eyes locked in a collision of stubborn wills. Then, to her shock, he gave the smallest, roughest hint of a nod. Not dominance, not command, respect. "Then stay at my side." His voice dropped to a vow. "Not behind me, not away from me, with me." Saris tightened the grip on the dagger he gave her. The rebels surged into the hall. Kale stepped forward. Saris stepped with him. Together, hunter and hunted, alpha and lumen blood, they faced the oncoming storm. The rebels poured into the ruined hall, blades raised, voices echoing through the stone vaults. Kale moved first, silent, lethal, a storm harnessed inside a man's body. Steel met steel with a scream of sparks. Saris stayed at his side just as she promised, dashed upward with the dagger. The blade grazed the rebel's arm, clumsy but honest. The man staggered back. For the first time, she saw it. She could fight. Kale dispatched two more with brutal precision before glancing at her, only a flick of his eyes, but enough to register what she'd done. The look that passed between them wasn't surprise, it was acknowledgement. But there were too many. The rebels pressed harder, forcing Kale and Saris back toward a collapsed arch near the far wall. Kale's breaths were controlled, but his movements were growing sharper, more violent. He was pushing past human limits. Saris blocked another strike, barely, her arm trembling. "Kale, there's no end to them." "There will be," he snarled, parrying the blade and driving his elbow into a rebel's jaw. "If they live only long enough to regret stepping foot in my home." Even now, even bleeding, he radiated command. Another rebel charged, this one heading straight for Saris. His sword arced toward her neck. Kale caught the man mid-strike, yanking him back by the collar and slamming a dagger into his ribs. The rebel fell, gasping. Kale turned on Saris, eyes burning, voice low and rough. I said with me, not in front of death. Then don't leave me space to fall, she shot back, breath shaking, but her eyes were steady. For a moment, just a moment, Kael stared at her as though she had done something far more dangerous than facing a sword. She had matched him. Before either could speak, the far wall trembled, dust rained down. A horn called somewhere deep in the tunnels, different from the rebels' signal. Kael stiffened. That's not them. Saris frowned. Then who? The wall split open, stone exploding outward in a blast of force that sent rubble across the floor. Saris shielded her head as Kael pulled her against him, turning his body to cover hers. When the dust settled, a single figure stepped through the smoke. Not a rebel, not a soldier. A hooded man with silver insignium across his chest. The same mark Saris had seen in her vision. Kael's entire body went rigid. "They'll counsel," he muttered, voice darkening with hate. "They want her too." The hooded man pushed back his cowl, revealing pale eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Kael Draven," he said calmly, as though they were meeting in a throne room instead of a battlefield. "Step aside. The girl's blood is not yours to guard." Kael moved in front of Saris, blocking her completely. "You will not touch her." The man raised a brow. "You risk your crown for a lumen blood. How uncharacteristically weak of you." Kael felt his breath shift, slow, lethal. "Weak?" Kael repeated, voice soft enough to be frightening. "Come and measure that word with your life." The hooded man smiled again. "Gladly." He lifted his hand. Light gathered in his palm. Saris's eyes widened. Kael reached for her, and the hall erupted in blinding white.
White light swallowed the hall. Saris threw her arms over her face as the force slammed into the stone, splitting pillars and shattering debris across the floor. The blast sent Kael and Saris crashing backward. She hit the ground hard, air ripping from her lungs. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but through the haze she felt it. A hand on her waist, pulling her against a familiar body, shielding her from falling stone. Kael. Even stunned, even breathless, his first instinct was her. When the light finally thinned, Saris blinked through the dust. The hooded councilman stood, untouched, at the center of the destruction, hand lowering as if he'd merely swatted away a fly. Kael rose to his feet, placing himself in front of her again, body curved to block her from harm. Blood trickled down his temple, but his eyes were wildfire. "You bring council magic into my walls," Kael growled, voice low and lethal. "I'll tear that hand from your arm." The man chuckled. "Still pretending you have a choice? Kael, you know what she is. You know what she can do. A lumen blood cannot belong to an alpha. She must be contained." Saris forced herself onto her elbows, pain lancing down her side. "I don't belong to anyone," she hissed. That made the man turn, really look at her. He smiled with something colder than steel. "No, girl, you don't understand. It isn't about belonging. It's about balance. Your kind does not bind just alphas. You bind kingdoms." Saris froze. Kael didn't. He moved, fast, primal, a blur of black and gold. His blade arced through the air, aimed straight for the councilman's throat. But the man raised his hand again, catching Kael's strike with a blast of force that sent Kael crashing into a broken pillar. "Kael!" Saris lurched forward, but a wall of invisible pressure slammed her down, pinning her to the stone floor. She gasped, struggling, fury sparking in her chest. The councilman walked towards Kael slowly, like a man strolling through a garden.
"Your father understood the danger of her kind," he said. "You should have killed her the moment you scented what she was." Cale pushed himself up, teeth bared, breath ragged. "I am not my father." The councilman crouched, gripping Cale's jaw. "No, you're weaker." Cale's eyes darkened, and something inside Cirrus snapped. Not fear, not helplessness. Power. Raw and rising. The pressure holding her down cracked. The councilman froze, then slowly turned his head towards her. His eyes narrowed. Cirrus's vision burned gold at the edges, her heartbeat roared in her ears, the air around her pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat outside her body. Cale sensed it too. His gaze snapped to hers, widening, not in fear, but recognition. "Cirrus, don't!" But it was too late. The force pinning her shattered like glass. Cirrus rose to her feet, unsteady, wild, breathing hard. Light flickered across her skin like threads of fire under the surface. The councilman stepped back, genuinely startled now. "Impossible!" Cale pushed to his feet, eyes locked on her with a mix of warning and awe. "Cirrus, listen to me." His voice was low, coaxing, urgent. "If you unleash it without control, it will consume you." She shook her head, breath trembling, tears burning unshed. "Then tell me how to stop it." Cale took one step towards her, hand out, voice rough with the truth he could no longer hide. "You can't." The hall trembled. Light surged again, and Cirrus realized this night wasn't about surviving him. It was about surviving herself. Power thrummed beneath Cirrus's skin like a second heartbeat, wild, ancient, and hungry. The rubble around her trembled as faint gold light veined across her arms, pulsing in sync with her breath. The councilman stepped back, eyes wide. "Lumen power without a bond," he whispered. "She'll tear this castle apart." Cirrus barely heard him. She was drowning in sensation, heat, memory, instinct, chaos. The visions from the woman in the stairwell flashed again in her mind. A burning throne, kingdoms falling, Kyle covered in blood. Kyle moved toward her, slow and deliberate, as if approaching a wounded, cornered predator. "Cirrus, look at me." She did. And the moment their eyes met, the power inside her surged harder, recognizing something in him it wanted, needed. Her voice shook. "I can't control it." Kyle's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed low, steady, one thread of calm in the storm. "Yes, you can. You just can't do it while you're afraid." The councilman scoffed. "Spare me. She is a living weapon, Kyle. You cannot soothe a wildfire." Kyle didn't look away from her, not for a heartbeat. "No, but I can stand inside the flames and make them mine." Cirrus's breath faltered. His words hit something deep, something terrifying and magnetic all at once. The councilman raised his hand, gathering power for another strike. "Then you will burn with her." Kyle moved instantly, stepping between the blast and Cirrus. Boom! The impact exploded across his back. Kyle dropped to one knee, teeth gritted, smoke curling from his armor. Cirrus gasped, reaching for him, but Kyle grabbed her wrist, the contact snapping her power back into her awareness. Not gone, not tamed, just tethered. His voice was a rasp. "Look at me, not at him, me." She did. Everything else, the rubble, the councilman, the flames, blurred at the edges. Just Kyle. The alpha who terrified her, the man who shielded her, the one who saw her as more than a weapon or a prize. Kyle lifted his hand to her cheek, thumb brushing her jaw despite the smoke and blood on his skin. "Breathe with me."
She felt herself matching his inhale, his exhale, the gold light softening, responding to his steadiness, like her power recognized him too. The councilman snarled, gathering force again. Pathetic. You cannot stop what she is becoming. Kael's eyes stayed on Ceres, but his words were for their enemy. You're right. He rose to his feet, placing himself fully in front of her again, blade drawn. I won't stop what she is. Then his voice dropped, a vow wrapped in steel and heat. I'll make sure no one else controls it. The councilman loosed another blast. Kael struck forward to meet it, and behind him, Ceres felt something shift. Not a loss of control, but the start of it. The bond she never wanted, the destiny she never asked for, the power she could no longer deny.
Kael charged into the councilman's blast, blade raised. The two forces collided, magic against steel, will against will, and the shockwave tore cracks through the stone floor. Ceres steadied herself against the wall, the gold beneath her skin reacting to every strike, every surge, every breath. She wasn't just watching the battle. She was connected to it. Kael swung with lethal precision, but the councilman countered with bursts of raw light, each one pushing Kael backward. The hooded man smiled behind the sparks. You fight well, Alpha, he taunted, but you fight blind. She cannot be hidden. Her power will call to every throne, every army, every hunger in this land. Kael snarled, driving forward again. Then I'll cut down every hand that reaches for her. The councilman slammed a palm against Kael's chest. Another blast of white force sent him skidding across the floor, armor scraping stone. Ceres's heart lurched. Kael didn't rise immediately. The councilman turned toward her, dust drifting through the fractured hall like ash. Come here, girl. You don't understand the storm inside you, but I do. I lived through your kind once. I watched what you can do to men. He stepped closer. Ceres pressed back against the wall, dagger clenched in her hand. Stay away from me. I don't wish to hurt you, he said, voice calm, persuasive, dangerous. I wish to save what's left of this world. You were never meant for an alpha. You are the chain and the key. A lumen blood must choose a king, not fall prey to one. Ceres shook her head, pulse thundering. I don't choose any of you. The councilman smiled sadly. You already have. Powers like yours don't answer reason. They answer instinct. And look at how you look at him. Ceres froze. Her breath hitched. The councilman's voice softened, deadly gentle. The moment you met that alpha's eyes, your ruin began. Enough! Kael's voice cut through the hall like a blade. He was on his feet again, eyes dark, jaw set, every inch of him coiled for the kill. The councilman stepped back, assessing. Even now your heart beats for him. That bond will destroy you both. I've seen kingdoms fall to smaller obsessions. Kael strode to Ceres's side, placing himself between her and the threat, every line of his body screaming, mine, not in word, but in stance, in breath, in purpose. The councilman raised his hand for another spell. Kael didn't wait. He lunged. Steel pierced flesh. The councilman gasped, looking down at the blade driven through his ribs. Kael leaned in, voice a whispered death sentence. No one speaks her fate but me. The councilman coughed a wet breath, but somehow, unbelievably, smiled. Then you'd better pray you're not too late. Light flared beneath his skin, not outward this time, but inward,
and in a burst of energy, his body disintegrated into dust and embers, scattering across the floor. Silence fell. Cirrus stared at the ashes, chest rising and falling in uneven waves. Kael turned to her. Blood streaked his jaw, soot marked his armor, and exhaustion pulled at the corners of his eyes. But his voice when he spoke was raw. Cirrus. He reached for her hand, slow, as if giving her a chance to refuse. I need you to trust me. No matter what you hear, no matter what comes next. She looked at his outstretched hand, at the man who fought armies for her, at the Alpha she should have feared, but whose presence steadied her more than her own breath. Why? Why me? Kael's voice dropped to a confession he never wanted to say. Because I cannot lose you. Cirrus's heart stopped and started again too fast. Before she could respond, the ground trembled overhead. The rebels hadn't retreated. The night was far from over. The earth rumbled again, dust raining from the ceiling. Cirrus steadied herself, heart pounding, but Kael didn't flinch. He stepped closer, close enough that she felt his breath against her temple, close enough that his presence drowned out the fear clawing up her spine. His hand hovered near her waist, not touching, but ready to pull her behind him if the world collapsed again. We have minutes at best, Kael murmured. The rebels will flood every tunnel until they find us. We move now. Cirrus nodded, but her voice betrayed the tremor inside her. You said there's more I needed to know. Kael's jaw tightened. He looked at her for a long moment, a moment that held equal parts war and want, before he answered. There is. His voice dropped lower, but not here. Not while I can still hear men dying above us. He turned, guiding her toward a reinforced doorway at the far end of the ruined hall. Cirrus followed, but something in her refused to let the silence bury the truth again. Kael. He stopped. She stepped in front of him, forcing him to face her. The gold in her eyes, faint but present, flickered like a warning flame. If I really am what they say, if I can bind you, why haven't I? Kael stared at her, expression unguarded for the first time that night. No armor, no throne, no command. Just a man standing before a truth he could no longer outrun. Because binding requires consent. Cirrus blinked. Consent? Kael nodded once, voice low, rough, at the edges. Lumen power doesn't take. It chooses. And once it chooses, it asks. Your instinct called to me, and mine answered. But until you speak the bond, until you accept it, there is no chain. Her breath hitched, not in fear, but in disbelief. So you're saying, I could command you if I wanted to. Kael stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. No. A beat. You could own me. The words trembled between them, heavy, intimate, forbidden. Cirrus's pulse raced. Kael held her gaze unblinking. That is why they hunt you. A lumen blood with a bonded alpha isn't just powerful, Cirrus. She is unstoppable. Silence. Raw, fragile, electric. Then, boom! The far wall exploded inward, flames and debris ripping through the chamber. The force hurled Cirrus forward, straight into Kael's chest. He caught her, wrapping his arm around her as the fire-lit smoke swallowed the room. Through the smoke, silhouettes moved, dozens of them, armed and advancing. The rebels had found them. Kael positioned himself in front of her again, sword lifting with lethal calm. His voice dropped to a command that vibrated through her bones. Stay with me. Do not let go. Cirrus gripped the dagger, stepping to his side, not behind him. I told you, I don't fall back.
Kale's eyes burned, pride, anger, desire, and something deeper mixing into gold fire. He nodded once. Together, they faced the advancing tide. 1 heartbeat. 2. Kale lifted his blade. Then, we finish this. And they charged into the flames.
Flames roared behind them as Kale and Ceres burst through the shattered wall, entering a wide, torch-lit corridor, one of the main passage routes beneath the citadel. Rebel boots thundered in pursuit, shouts echoing like a pack of wolves locked on fresh blood. Kale didn't slow. He grabbed Ceres's hand, not to drag her, but to anchor her, and pulled her into a sprint. Their footsteps pounded in unison. The distant clash of steel and dying soldiers above reminded them how little of the night remained. "Where are we going?" Ceres called over the chaos. Kale's voice was sharp, focused. "To the lower gates. If we reach the ravine, they lose their numbers advantage." Ceres tightened her grip on his hand. "And if we don't?" Kale didn't lie, didn't soften. "Then they bury us in these tunnels and turn your body into a crown." Ceres exhaled through her teeth. Fury cut clean through her fear. They turned a corner and were met with a wall of rebels blocking the corridor. Kale yanked Ceres behind a stone column as arrows slammed into the wall where she had just been standing. "Trapped," she whispered. "No," Kale growled. "Not yet." He scanned the hall, calculating, and then he looked at her, really looked at her. The gold in her eyes glowed like molten dawn. "Do you trust me, Ceres?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes." The answer hit him harder than any blade. He stepped close, so close she felt his heartbeat against her own. His hand lifted, fingers brushing her cheek, grounding her and igniting her in the same breath. Then listen carefully. His voice dropped to a low, commanding whisper. "Your power answers emotion, not thought. Focus on one thing, one truth, and let everything else burn away." Her pulse raced. What truth? Kale leaned in, lips almost grazing her ear as he spoke. "That I will not die tonight, not while you breathe beside me." The words struck her chest like a spark to oil. The gold under her skin flared. Her breath hitched. She gripped his wrist, a shock of heat surging through her palm into him. Kale's eyes widened as golden threads of light coiled between them, invisible to all but them. Not a bond, not yet. But the pull tightened. "Ceres," he rasped. "Can you feel it?" She swallowed, voice barely a whisper. "Yes." Then Kale turned, stepping out from the column with predatory confidence. "Stay behind me, but not in fear, in purpose." The rebels roared and rushed forward. Kale charged to meet them. Steel clashed, sparks flew, bodies fell. And Ceres, for the first time, reached for the power without drowning in it. The corridor trembled, dust rained from the ceiling, a ripple of force pulsed outward from her feet, knocking several rebels off balance, clearing Kale's flank. His eyes flicked toward her mid-fight. Not shocked, proud. But more rebels poured in from the other end of the hall. They were being closed in, 2 walls of death, one narrowing path, no way through. Kale backed toward her, blades dripping, chest heaving. "We're out of corridor," he muttered. Ceres lifted her chin, gold growing brighter. "Then we make one." Kale stared at her, and for the first time that night, the ghost of a fierce, hungry smile cut across his face. "Do it." Ceres closed her eyes. Focused. Not on fear. Not on destiny. Not on power. On him. Light shattered through the corridor, and the world split open.
Power unleashed, fear and awe, escalation of the bond. Light erupted from Ceres in a blinding wave. The stone beneath their feet cracked outward like shattered ice. Wind and force blasted down the corridor, ripping torches from the walls and flinging rebel soldiers backward as though they were weightless. Screams were swallowed by the roar of power. Cale braced himself, one arm raised, teeth clenched against the gale. But he did not step back from her. He stepped closer. The ground split open between them and the enemy, creating a jagged trench that swallowed rubble and bodies alike. When the last echo of power faded, silence crashed down. Dozens of rebels lay unconscious or dead. Smoke curled through the broken corridor. Dust drifted like gray snow. Ceres collapsed to her knees, trembling, her breath shallow and uneven. The gold in her veins dimmed, flickering uncertainly. Cale was at her side instantly, dropping to one knee in front of her. "Ceres." She lifted her head, dazed. I didn't mean to." Cale gripped her shoulders, firm and grounding, forcing her eyes to meet his. "You meant to survive." His voice was low but fierce. "Do not apologize for that." Her breath shuddered, but it was out of control. Cale leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. His voice softened, just for her. "Power doesn't frighten me. Losing you does." Her heart twisted, and for a moment the world around them, the bodies, the stone, the fire, disappeared. But the reprieve was short. Boots sounded again from beyond the ruins. More rebels, the next wave. The war was still coming. Cale rose, offering his hand. "On your feet, we move." Ceres hesitated, not because she didn't trust him, but because she suddenly feared herself. Cale saw it in her eyes, so he did not repeat the command. He stepped closer, voice deepening. "Look at me." She did. "That power answered you, not the council, not the rebels, not fate." He paused, letting the words cut through her panic. "It is yours, and I am not afraid of it." Slowly, Ceres placed her hand in his. Cale pulled her to her feet, effortlessly, as though her weight was nothing. As she stood, she swayed, and his hand moved to her waist, steadying her. Not possession, protection. They locked eyes, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them. Something that felt dangerously close to surrender. Then, boom, boom, boom. A battering ram pounded a nearby gate. They didn't have long. Cale released her waist, turning towards the sound. 2 more corridors, then the lower gates in the ravine. After that, we disappear into the wilds. Ceres blinked. "Disappear?" "Yes," his voice hardened. "If the council is involved, this is bigger than a rebellion. I won't let you be their prize." She stepped in front of him this time. "Cale, why would you risk your kingdom for me?" He didn't look away. He didn't soften. He gave her the truth. "Because a kingdom I can rebuild." A beat. "But you, there is only one of you." Her breath caught. Before either could say another word, the gate finally splintered and armed rebels stormed into the corridor. Cale drew his blade. Ceres gripped her dagger. Side by side, not king and subject, not Alpha and Omega, but 2 against the world, they faced the oncoming flood once more.
War tightens, exhaustion rises, trust deepens, stakes turn sharper. The rebels surged through the splintered gate, filling the corridor with steel and fury. Cale stepped forward to meet them, movements sharp and merciless despite the blood on his armor. Each strike was efficient, brutal, final. But even the strongest blade dulls when the battle never ends. Ceres fought at his side, smaller, faster, her dagger flashing in quick, controlled arcs. She was no trained warrior, but instinct and terror sharpened her focus. Twice she slipped past a killing blow by inches. Twice her courage was the difference between life and death. Still, the enemy kept coming. Too many. Cale blocked a spear, shattered its shaft, and rammed his blade into the attacker's chest.
He didn't turn, didn't breathe, didn't stop as he called out, "Ceres, left flank!" She spun just in time, ducking beneath a sword and driving her dagger up under the rebel's ribs. Warmth splashed her hands. She staggered, staring for a heartbeat too long at the man collapsing at her feet. Cale caught her wrist, yanking her back before another blade took her head. His voice was a growl, low and urgent. "Do not look at the body. Look at me." Ceres's chest heaved. She forced her eyes to Cale's, anchoring herself in his steadiness, his fire, his certainty. He held her there for half a second, enough to pull her mind back from the edge, then released her hand and turned to finish the last attacker. Silence fell. Not peace, the silence of a battlefield between waves. Cale wiped his blade and scanned the corridor ahead. His breathing was controlled, but his shoulders were taut. He was calculating, measuring, preparing for the next storm. Sarah stood at his side, smaller, faster, her dagger flashing in quick, controlled arcs. She was no trained warrior, but instinct and terror sharpened her focus. She held her back again, pulling her mind back from the edge, then released her hand and turned to finish the last attacker. Silence fell. Not peace, the silence of a battlefield between waves. Cale wiped his blade and scanned the corridor ahead. His breathing was controlled, but his shoulders were taut. He was calculating, measuring, preparing for the next storm. Sarah stood at his side, voice trembling but firm. "How many more?" Cale didn't lie. "Enough to drown us, unless we reach the ravine first." Sarah swallowed. "And if we don't?" He slid his sword into position again, eyes burning. "Then I make my last stand, with you at my side." Her heart twisted, painfully, dangerously. No vow had ever sounded so reckless or so true. They ran. Through smoke-filled passages, past fallen guard posts, down a staircase that spiraled into the lowest section of the citadel. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until their breaths fogged in front of them. The corridor narrowed to a long stone bridge over a black chasm, the ravine. Freedom lay on the other side. Cale exhaled once, steadying himself. One crossing, then the forest, then silence. But as they stepped onto the bridge, torches flared to life on the far end. Figures emerged from the shadows. Not rebels. Armored, disciplined, crest-marked. Ceres froze. Cale's jaw locked. "The Council's knights," he muttered. "They moved faster than I thought." The knights raised their weapons in perfect unison, blocking the only exit. Behind them, distant footsteps echoed. Rebels, closing in. Ceres looked back, forward, then at Cale. Trapped. A corridor of death behind them, a wall of council steel ahead, a chasm below. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Cale turned to her, and though the world cornered them, his eyes held no fear. Only resolve. Only fire. Only her. "We don't surrender." He stepped in front of her again, as he had every time, every battle, every heartbeat of this night, and lifted his sword. "Stay close. Breathe. And when I tell you to run, run." Ceres lifted her dagger, pulse racing, not from terror, but because she believed him. Because she chose him. The council knights lowered their spears. Cale lowered his stance. And on the edge of the ravine, outnumbered and exhausted, they prepared to fight the entire world.
Siege of the Bridge, Breaking Point, Alpha Instinct versus Destiny. The bridge groaned beneath their feet as the council mights advanced in flawless formation, shields locked, spears angled, boots striking stone in perfect rhythm. Behind them, the echo of rebel war cries swelled, sealing Cale and Cirrus between two crushing tides. Cale stepped forward, sword raised, shoulders squared against impossible odds. Cirrus stayed at his side, refusing to fall behind him, even as fear curled cold fingers around her ribs. The knights halted a short distance away. One stepped forward, their captain, helm under his arm, gray eyes sharp and unyielding. "King Cale Draven," the man announced, voice echoing down the ravine. "By order of the Vale Council, surrender the Lumen Blood. She will be taken into custody. You will be spared." Cirrus stiffened. Cale didn't move, didn't blink. "You want my answer?" he said, voice low. The captain nodded once. Cale pointed his blade at their ranks. "Step forward and die on this bridge." The captain's jaw tightened. "So be it." He raised his hand. "Advance!" The knights surged. Cale turned his head just enough to speak to Cirrus, his voice a razor-edged whisper. "Stay at my left, never out of reach. Do you understand?" She nodded. The first knight lunged. Cale met him with a brutal parry, twisting and driving his blade into the man's throat. Cirrus blocked a spear, slashing a vulnerable joint in another knight's armor. Cale spun, shielding her flank, kicking an attacker over the ravine edge, a scream fading into the chasm below. But for every knight they dropped, two more pressed forward. Steel clashed, sparks burst, the bridge shuddered beneath trampling boots and raining blood. Cirrus blocked a strike, barely, the impact numbing her arm. A second spear shot toward her ribs. Cale caught it mid-thrust with his bare hand. Blood slicked his palm as he snapped the spear in half and rammed the broken end through the knight's chest. He didn't look at his wound, didn't acknowledge pain. His focus was absolute, feral, singular. Cirrus. But she could see it in his movements now. He was tiring. Not in spirit, in body. Even an alpha bled. Even an alpha broke. And the enemy lines kept tightening. "Cale," she gasped, "we can't hold this." "Yes, we can," he roared back, shoving her behind him as three knights attacked at once. "As long as you breathe, I stand." But then, a horn blew. From the rebel side. The rebels had reached the bridge. Hundreds. Cirrus's stomach dropped. They were surrounded. Council in front, rebels behind. No escape, no route, no wall, no gate, just a narrow strip of stone above an endless fall. Cale's breaths grew heavier, slower. Rage burned in his eyes, not at the enemy, at fate, at destiny, at the gods that dared corner him like an animal. He turned to Cirrus, and for the first time she saw it in his face. He didn't know a way out. Not this time. His hand rose, cupping her cheek, not a command, not a caress of desire, but something rawer, more dangerous, a silent apology. "Cale," he breathed, voice rough, "if they reach you." "Don't," her voice broke, "don't you say it." His thumb brushed her jaw, gentle even with blood on his skin. "I swore I'd keep you alive." The knights reformed their line. The rebels raised their weapons. The bridge trembled as both armies began their final charge. Cale stepped in front of her one last time, and Cirrus grabbed his wrist. "No more running." Her voice shook, but her eyes were burning gold.
No more standing alone. Kale stared at her, and in that instant, a single heartbeat on a dying bridge, something passed between them. Not a bond spoken, a bond chosen. Cirrus lifted her chin. Tell me what to do, and I will. Kale's eyes widened, not with command, with hope. Then stay with me, he whispered, whatever comes next. Their enemies charged, and together, hand in hand, power and steel, lumen and alpha, they turned to face the end of the bridge.
The bridge of no return. Explosion of fate. Survival or fall. Both armies charged. The bridge thundered beneath the stampede. Steel, rage, war cries, and death racing toward the two figures standing at its center. Kale tightened his grip on Cirrus's hand, and without looking away from the enemy, he spoke one command. Close your eyes. Cirrus obeyed. Kale released her and stepped forward, shoulders squared, blade lifting in a slow, deliberate arc. Her one breath, one heartbeat, the world held still around him. Then Kale roared, a sound that shook the stone and sent terror lancing through the men rushing toward them. Not a king's roar, an alpha's. A true, unleashed alpha, ancient, sovereign, and wrath-bound. He met the first knight head-on, blade cleaving through shield and bone. Sparks exploded, blood sprayed. Another enemy lunged. Kale spun, ripping through armor and sending the body over the ravine edge. He fought like a force of nature, every strike a sentence, every movement a vow. But there were too many. Even he could not stand forever. Behind him, Cirrus felt the storm of power rising inside her again, hot, electric, terrifying. She opened her eyes. Gold flooded her vision. The world sharpened. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat around her became painfully clear. Kale parried another strike, barely. Cirrus whispered, voice trembling, Kale, I feel everything. He didn't turn, didn't look, but answered through clenched teeth. Then choose what you feel. Her heart pounded. I don't know how. You do. A parry, a slash, a snarl of pain. Kale staggered but didn't fall. Because you chose me. Those words detonated something inside her. Not fear. Conviction. Cirrus lifted her hand. Golden light rippled outward. The charging rebels faltered, the front line stumbling, weapons shaking. The ravine wind howled, swirling around her like a summoned tempest. Cirrus wasn't drowning in the power this time. She was breathing it. It obeyed her pulse, her will, her choice. Kale glanced back, eyes widening, not in panic, but in awe. The gold climbed her arms, her neck, her jaw, glowing brighter, brighter, until the very air around her shimmered. Cirrus raised both hands and spoke, not loudly, but with unshakable clarity. Stop. The world obeyed. Every enemy on the bridge, rebel and knight, froze in place. Muscles locked, eyes wild with terror. They strained against invisible bonds but could not move, could not strike, could not advance. Kale stood panting in the center of the carnage, dripping blood, chest heaving. Slowly he turned to face her fully. The glow lit his features in warm, unreal light. Something fierce and unguarded flickered across his eyes. But Cirrus's legs buckled. The power that obeyed her did not come freely. It drained, searing through her veins like fire. Her vision blurred. The golden light wavered. She collapsed. Kale caught her before her body hit the stone, dropping to his knees with her cradled in his arms. Cirrus. Her eyelids fluttered. I held them.
But I can't keep... He cupped the back of her head, forcing her gaze to stay on his. You did enough. I have you. I'm here. Her breath trembled against his chest. The glow flickered weaker. Cale looked up, at the frozen army, at the narrowing time left, and at the ravine that offered the only escape left. There was only one path now. He lifted her, holding her against him, and whispered into her hair. Then forgive me for what happens next. Cale stood, turned, and carrying Saris in his arms, he leapt off the bridge, into the ravine, into the dark, into fate.
The fall, the aftermath, the breaking quiet before the next storm. Cold air swallowed them. Cale and Cirrus plunged into the ravine, wind tearing past them in a violent rush. Cirrus barely clung to consciousness, her cheek pressed to Cale's chest, the world spinning into streaks of black and gold. Cale tightened his hold around her, one arm bracing her head, the other gripping a dagger he drove into the canyon wall. Stone shrieked against steel. The impact nearly tore his shoulder from its socket, but it slowed their fall. Sparks rained in their wake as he carved a brutal descent down the rock face. The dagger snapped. They dropped the last distance into a river below. Crash! The icy water swallowed them whole. The current roared, slamming Cale against hidden stone, but he never released her, never loosened his grip for even a heartbeat. He kicked, fought, dragged her upward until his head broke the surface with a desperate gasp. He pulled Cirrus to his chest with one arm and swam through violent water, letting the current carry them until it spat them into calmer shallows downstream. They washed ashore beside a jagged bank of rocks and moss. Cale hauled himself up first, then lifted Cirrus onto the cold ground, falling to his knees beside her. She was pale. Her breaths were shallow, uneven. The golden glow beneath her skin flickered weakly, like a candle guttering in wind. Cale leaned over her, water dripping from his hair and jaw, eyes burning with a fear he would never show another soul. Cirrus. His voice was rough, raw. Stay with me. Her lashes trembled. She tried to speak, but only a thin breath escaped. Cale tore off his soaked cloak and wrapped it around her, before pulling her into his arms again, his forehead resting against hers. Breathe. That's all I ask. Just breathe. Her fingers curled weakly into his shirt. Did we make it? She whispered. Cale closed his eyes for half a beat. We're alive. That's enough for now. She gave the ghost of a nod, but her strength faded again. The ravine wind howled around them, carrying the distant echoes of war above. The rebellion still raging, the council still hunting, kingdoms still shifting in the dark. Down here, though, there was only the river, the stone, the cold, and them. Cale lifted her into his arms again and stood, scanning the shadowed forest at the ravine's edge. They needed shelter, fire, time. He started toward the trees, one determined step after another, carrying her as though she weighed nothing. Cirrus forced her eyes open again. Cale, why didn't you let me fall alone? He looked down at her, rainwater tracing hard lines across his face. Because the moment I chose you, Cirrus. His voice dropped, stripped of every mask, every wall, every throne. I stopped choosing myself. Her breath caught. Not from pain, from truth. She tried to hold his gaze, but exhaustion dragged her under. Her head fell against his chest, her eyes fluttering shut at last. Cale's arms tightened, protective and unyielding. Sleep. He murmured,
voice low and fierce. "I'll keep you." And as he vanished into the dark forest with her in his arms, one truth settled over the broken night. The world believed they had fallen, but this was not their end. It was only the part of the story where legends disappear and return changed.
The forest of ash pines, wounds, walls, and the first quiet after war. Night clung to the forest like a second skin. Tall ash pines swayed overhead, their branches whispering with the wind as Kale pushed deeper into the wilderness, Ceres cradled in his arms. Every step was heavy, but his grip on her never loosened, not when pain burned through his muscles, not when blood dripped from the gash beneath his armor, not when exhaustion clawed at the edges of his vision. He would break before he dropped her. At last he found shelter, a narrow hollow beneath an old stone outcrop, half hidden by roots and moss. It wasn't comfort, but it was cover, safety, time. Kale knelt and laid Ceres gently on the dry leaves. Her skin was cold, too cold, and her breathing shallow. The night stole heat fast. He stripped off his soaked armor, tearing a scrap of cloak to bind the bleeding on his forearm, before turning all his focus back to her. Her power had saved them, but it had nearly consumed her. Kale brushed damp hair from her forehead. "Wake up, Ceres. I need your fire, not your silence." Her eyelids fluttered, just slightly, enough for relief to loosen his shoulders by a fraction. He built a small fire, coaxing flame from flint and spark until warmth began to fill the hollow. Then he sat beside her and took her hand, not out of tenderness, but because he needed to feel her pulse under his fingers. Proof she was still here. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. The forest breathed. Then finally, Ceres stirred. Her voice was a whisper against the dark. "Kale." He leaned closer. "I'm here." Her eyes opened slowly. The gold was dim, but alive. She swallowed. "Did they follow?" "If they did, they'll find a king before they find you." She studied his face, the bruise at his jaw, the blood on his collar, the exhaustion he couldn't hide. Guilt flickered across her features. "You're hurt because of me." Kale's eyes hardened, not at her, but at the thought. "I bleed from many things in this life, Ceres. You are the one wound I do not regret." Her breath caught. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It pulsed, thick with unspoken truths neither of them knew how to hold. After a moment, Ceres whispered, "On that bridge, I felt everything. Every heartbeat, every fear, every intention. I could have bent them. All of them. I could have—" Kale cut in, voice firm. "And you stopped. You held back. That matters." She turned her face toward the fire. "You think I controlled it, but I didn't. I was losing myself." Kale lowered his head slightly, gaze never leaving her. "Then I'll hold you to this world if I must, even if your power tries to pull you out of it." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and there it was again, that pull between them, the one no battlefield, no throne, no destiny could smother. Not anymore. "Kale," she whispered, voice unsteady, "what happens now?" The firelight carved sharp lines across his features as he answered, "Now, we disappear. The council will hunt you. The rebels will hunt me. And if either finds us before you learn to control what burns inside you—" A beat. "The world will decide our fate for us." She exhaled slowly. "And if I learn to control it?" Kale's jaw clenched. The answer he gave her was a vow. "Then we stop running." The fire crackled louder.
She nodded, finally. Not in surrender, but in acceptance. Then teach me. Kale's eyes softened in a way she had never seen. Rest first. His voice dropped, low and certain. At dawn, we begin. Outside, the night wind howled. Inside the hollow, two fugitives, a hunted lumen and a fallen alpha king, sat by a fire the world believed had already gone out. But their war was only beginning.